This is Still Unanswered. I'm Emily Hart. Today, we're revisiting a case that cut right across the heartland. Small shops, strip malls, a killer who seemed to use the interstate like a set of invisible train tracks. We call him the I-70 killer. It's April 1992. 5 scenes, 3 states, 6 victims in about 30 days. The crimes were linked by one chilling common thread: a .22 caliber weapon shot to the back of the head, usually in a back room or storage area. Let's start at the end. No, not the end of the story, but the last confirmed murder in that month-long spree. Then we'll walk back through it all.
Sounds good, Emily. Lead the way.
Raytown, Missouri. May 7, 1992. Sarah Blessing, 37, owner and worker at the Store of Many Colors, a small gift shop in a strip mall near I-70. A neighboring video store owner later said he saw a man enter Sarah's shop and moments after heard a single pop. He looked out and saw the man walk away, and then he went in and found Sarah in a back room, shot in the back of the head. It was quiet, precisely the sort of scene that would become the pattern in this case.
Yeah. That hearing of a pop, it's a small detail, but it tells us a lot. The suspect was using a low-report weapon, the kind of gun that doesn't echo through a mall. It fits with the .22 caliber we'll mention again and again in this case.
And Sarah should have been off that day. She'd come in so a coworker could rest. That small kindness put her there. It's a theme you return to in these stories. Ordinary acts, ordinary people, ordinary days that end in extraordinary violence.
It makes you think about how unpredictable danger sometimes is. How a schedule change, a free afternoon, the simplest human decency can intersect with a predator's plan.
Before Raytown, there was St. Charles. On May 3rd, Nancy Kitzmiller, 24, petite, brunette, working at Boot Millage, a Western footwear shop. She opened around noon, and by about 2:30 p.m., customers found her in a back room, shot the same way. Another small shop, another clerk working alone. A witness had seen her shortly before with a male customer, and that sighting helped investigators build a composite that would later be circulated on TV shows like Unsolved Mysteries.
And earlier in April, there was Terre Haute Michael McCown, 40, stocking shelves at Sylvia's Ceramics on the 27th. The one male in the confirmed series, long hair in a ponytail, working for his mother's shop. Investigators suspect the killer may have expected a woman. Sylvia's sounded feminine, and the way McCown was kneeling or bent while working might have contributed to his mistake. It's an important and haunting detail because it tells us the offender had a specific victim type in mind.
Right. Then Wichita, April 11th, 2 victims: Patricia Majors, 32, owner of a bridal boutique, and Patricia Smith, 23, an employee. They stayed after closing to help a male customer pick up a cummerbund. The killer forced them to the back and shot them both in the head. This scene gave investigators what they described as the best eyewitness account. A man walked in soon after the killings and encountered the gunman, who ordered him to leave. He later provided details that led to a composite sketch.
That scene is crucial. 2 things happen. The offender shows his ability to maintain control even when unexpected complications occur, another clerk, and we get a direct witness description. The composite from Wichita and other sightings became the case's most public face.
And the first murder in the confirmed series, April 8th in Indianapolis. Robin Foldauer, 26, manager at a Payless shoe source, found around 3 p.m. in a back room after being shot in the back of the head. The register was open and less than $100 was missing. So small amounts of money taken, again and again, making robbery look like motive on the surface, but not quite adding up beneath the facts.
Exactly. If robbery were the primary motive, you'd expect larger takes or signs of a chaotic struggle. Instead, here we see a controlled approach. The offender engages, isolates the clerk, delivers a single shot from behind, and takes a small, almost symbolic amount of cash. It muddies the motive. Was it a staged robbery, ritual, or an effort to create plausible deniability?
It's the plausible deniability piece that still gnaws at families. You tell someone the killer may have staged robberies, and it can sound like an attempt to rationalize the brutality, but it's also a working theory grounded in the consistency of the behavior. The crimes happened during slow business times, after lunch, around closing, and along a corridor that in 1992 was still light on security cameras and heavy on strip malls and specialty shops, bridal boutiques, ceramic stores, small shoe shops, Western boot stores.
And all of those were often staffed by one or two people. Minimal oversight, minimal witnesses, and, importantly, minimal security technology. This was the era before widespread CCTV, especially in small independent businesses. That allowed the offender to move in with less risk of being recorded on camera.
Let's talk a bit about the weapon and the forensics. Ballistics tied the 5 murders of women and the 1 male victim to the same gun. The bullets were .22 caliber, and investigators traced the ammunition to CCI copper-clad lead. They also found an unusual trace on some casings, jeweler's rouge, a fine polishing compound. Marcus, that detail always stood out to me. It gave the case a kind of occupational whisper. What does jeweler's rouge tell an analyst?
Right. The jeweler's rouge is a fascinating trace. It isn't definitive by itself, but it's suggestive. That compound is used to polish metals and would be present on the hands or workspace of people who work intimately with metal surfaces. Jewelers, machinists, gunsmiths, tool and die workers, even hobbyists who clean and polish firearms. Investigators use that to craft hypotheses about the offender's possible occupation or hobbies. It's the kind of detail that helps narrow the field, even if it's not a smoking gun.
They also zeroed in on likely pistol models. Public reporting mentioned an Irma Verge ET-22 and the Intratec Tech-22 semi-automatics, one German-made and relatively uncommon, the other more widely known as the Tech-22, but authorities never publicly ruled out other models. Ballistics narrowed the caliber and ammo, but didn't produce a recovered weapon in the public record.
And that's a problem. .22s can be finicky to match, especially if you don't have the weapon to compare. Cartridge casings and bullets can show characteristic markings, but damage and the small size complicate things. So the ballistics connection told investigators these crimes were tied by a single firearm, but the exact make and model were never definitively produced in a public way.
The composite sketches, those became the public image. Witness descriptions converged on a white male, late 20s to early 30s at the time, 5'7" to 5'9", thin frame, sandy blonde or reddish hair, sometimes medium length, and a notable detail, droopy or heavy eyelids. Those sketches were circulated nationally on programs like America's Most Wanted and Unsolved Mysteries in the 90s. In 2021, St. Charles Police even released age-progressed images to suggest how he might look now.
Age progression is useful for reigniting tips. If someone knew a man who fit that sketch in 1992, they might think of a different face in 2021 or 2024. The evolution, possible thinning hair, graying, doesn't change core facial features like eyelid shape. That's why investigators emphasize those stable traits when they ask the public to look again.
We should pause and humanize the victims. It's something I feel strongly about. So often, these cases reduce people to statistics. Robin Foldauer was 26, managing a Payless. Patricia Majors ran a bridal shop. Patricia Smith was 23 and helping a customer. Both killed amid wedding gowns and accessories. Michael McCown was working in his mother's ceramics shop, Sylvia's, and may have been misidentified as female because of the store name and his long hair. Nancy Kitzmiller gave up a day off to cover for a coworker. Sarah Blessing was an independent shop owner, creative, community-minded. Little details, her neighbor finding her body, those details make the loss real.
Those human stories are critical. They remind us that the investigative puzzle comes at a tremendous human cost. Families don't just want answers to intellectual questions. They want closure for the everyday things that were stolen. Birthdays, anniversaries, grandchildren, the life someone would have had.
The investigation itself was complicated by jurisdictional lines. These murders crossed Indiana, Kansas, and Missouri. In the early 90s, different record systems and less instant cross-agency communication made it harder to link crimes quickly. It took detectives noticing a pattern: the small specialty store, same .22 caliber, similar execution, to assemble a multi-state task force. Ballistics ultimately confirmed the link, but coordinating all of that was slow. And over decades, people retire, cases get boxed up, tips can be misfiled.
Those systemic frictions are common in multi-state serial cases, especially before digital databases matured. The I-70 corridor itself turned out to be an advantage for the offender. Interstate movement means different law enforcement jurisdictions, which can fragment the investigative lens. It's one reason the highway became part of the moniker. The killer appears to have used I-70 as a mobile hunting ground.
Let's talk about suspected additional crimes. Investigators and journalists have discussed 3 Texas shootings in 1993-1994 that share some surface similarities: female clerks, shooting attacks, but Texas ballistics suggested a different caliber in at least some of those cases, and Texas investigators were skeptical of linking them. So that's one set of possible links that remain debated. Then there's a 2001 Terre Haute killing, Billy Brossman, shot working a liquor store. Some investigators considered it because it was near I-70 and the city was the same as the 1992 ceramics murder. But again, ballistics weren't publicly confirmed as a match. The case could have gone dormant, or the offender may have evolved, or these later shootings are simply similar crimes.
Yes, it's a recurring issue. Do you expand the series early and possibly include unrelated crimes, or keep the series tightly defined and risk missing genuine links? The Texas cases show why that's hard. Similar MO doesn't guarantee the same actor, and caliber and ballistics evidence are critical. As for 2001, a nearly decade-long hiatus would be unusual but not impossible. Serial offenders sometimes have long cooling-off periods, or they may have been incarcerated for another crime, or died, or stopped for personal reasons. Without clear ballistics or DNA, those connections remain speculative.
Speaking of DNA, public records indicate there's no widely publicized DNA profile of the I-70 killer sent into CODIS with a publicly disclosed hit. Many of the scenes were remarkably clean-controlled attacks, likely gloves, minimal physical contact, so usable forensic material might be limited. But that doesn't mean modern techniques can't help down the line. Marcus, what are the realistic possibilities for DNA or genealogical leads in a case like this?
If there's any preserved trace blood, skin cells, sweat on a doorknob, firearm residue inside a cartridge area, modern labs can sometimes extract partial DNA profiles that older tech couldn't. Genetic genealogy requires a reasonably complete profile, but sometimes partials can be informative. That said, we have to be careful. Public information doesn't show a CODIS match, and we can't claim one exists. Theoretically, if preserved DNA were reanalyzed and produced a profile, investigative genetic genealogy could be used, subject to legal and policy constraints, to identify family lines. It's an avenue, but we don't know if the evidence needed is there.
That unknown is hard for families. It's also the reason law enforcement periodically re-engages cases like this. New technology and renewed public interest can combine in surprising ways. Which brings us to media coverage. Unsolved Mysteries and America's Most Wanted featured the case in the 90s, and people still remember those broadcasts. TV generates tips, sometimes good, sometimes not. What did media attention do for the case?
Media attention raised awareness and generated leads. It made the composite and the pattern known to a broader audience, which is both critical and hazardous. On the positive side, someone with relevant memory might come forward. On the negative side, media can bring false confessions, misdirected tips, and armchair speculation that complicates active investigations. The best outcome is when the public sees a sketch or a detail and thinks, "I knew someone like that," and then reaches out to investigators, not social media detectives. But again, the case never produced the decisive tip publicly reported.
We should cover some suspects and names that came up and were later eliminated, so listeners don't conflate rumor with fact. Two names often mentioned in public reporting: Donald Waterhouse and Sean Patrick Goebel. Waterhouse was arrested in June 1992 for killing his mother and stepfather. He was briefly considered, but eliminated due to height and age mismatch. Goebel, a truck driver arrested in 1995 for multiple murders, was considered because truckers have interstate access, but his known MO and victim profile didn't line up well with the I-70 composite, and investigators moved away from him. There are also armchair connections to the I-70 strangler, but law enforcement treats those as distinct. Different victims, different methods.
It's important to stress the difference between proximity and proof. A truck driver operating on interstates is an easy hypothesis. Truckers travel widely. But without corroborating physical evidence, motive overlap, or matching behavioral patterns, it's circumstantial. The same goes for other public rumors. Good investigators test those hypotheses rigorously, and in these cases, they were ruled out for clear reasons: mismatched descriptions, differing methods, or ballistic inconsistencies.
Let's dig into behavioral profiling, because people often ask what kind of person would do this. From the pattern, investigators described an organized offender, choosing specific times, small shops with minimal staff, bringing a small concealable gun, using a quick execution-style headshot. The jeweler's rouge suggested someone meticulous or with a metalworking trade. The offender avoided mess and confrontation, and he sometimes spared male customers, like the Wichita witness, suggesting a narrow victim focus. Marcus, how do these factors paint a portrait of possible lifestyle and demographics?
The profile built by examining those elements would suggest a white male in his mid-20s to mid-30s in 1992, so now in his 50s or 60s. He likely had employment or a lifestyle that allowed travel along highways, sales, service, delivery, or even an itinerant job. Someone with firearm familiarity, calm under stress, skilled at planning and execution, traits of an organized offender. The rouge suggests either a trade involving polishable metal or a meticulous attention to the maintenance of firearms. Socially, he may have been unremarkable to neighbors, quiet, reliable, yet harboring deep resentments or fantasies directed at women in visible service roles. All of these remain hypotheses, but they help investigators focus inquiries.
And we must note motive theories, but carefully. The targeting of female clerks suggests anger directed at a category of women, or at women working in public service roles. The lack of sexual assault suggests the crime was about control and depersonalization. Robbery appears secondary. But there are also alternative possibilities. Could an offender have been testing the waters, practicing a method that later changed? Or could these be the work of someone who was passing through, intentionally, on a road trip, moving between relationships or jobs?
All plausible. Serial offenders sometimes experiment with methods or victim types early in a career, or they refine an approach to minimize risk. This burst of attacks across different states in a single month suggests either a concentrated period of opportunity or a deliberate tour. If he was itinerant by occupation, that explains the range. If it was a personal tour, it suggests other motives, perhaps a psychological compulsion that needed to be acted on. We can't pick one definitive motive without more evidence.
So why, after strong links, sketches, media coverage, why does this case remain unsolved? We've touched on forensic limitations of the time, jurisdictional fragmentation, and the possibility the killer stopped, died, or was incarcerated for other reasons. Also, the nature of the weapon. .22s can be hard to trace unless the firearm is recovered. And scenes that are intentionally clean and controlled leave few biological traces. Over decades, witness memories fade, files move, budgets shift. That combination keeps important cases in limbo.
To add, the early 90s lacked the centralized interagency data sharing we have now. Ballistic databases and national violent crime linkages are stronger today. That doesn't mean an answer is impossible, far from it, but it does help explain why the pattern wasn't stopped in real time and why the investigative momentum has ebbed and flowed.
There are modern possibilities worth discussing. Age-progressed sketches, released by St. Charles PD in 2021, tried to jog memories. New digital databases and national ballistic systems, like NIBIN, can re-examine evidence. And, of course, genetic genealogy, if viable DNA exists, offers a path that wasn't imaginable in 1992. But publicly, we have no confirmation of a DNA hit, so we're careful not to promise outcomes that aren't supported by the record.
Right. We should be careful and realistic. If DNA is recovered and viable, genetic genealogy could be transformational, as it was in other high-profile cases. If not, there's still the chance that someone who knows something, an old associate, a former partner, a coworker, could come forward now that the case is back in the media. Cold recognition is often what breaks these things open.
Let's spend a few minutes on the ethical side. Marcus, you've worked with cold case units. How do you balance the need to keep a case alive through publicizing details with the risk of causing additional distress to families or creating false leads?
It's a real tension. On the one hand, public attention generates leads and keeps pressure on resources. On the other hand, repeated publicity can re-traumatize families, invite speculative and sometimes cruel online commentary, and produce a pile of unhelpful tips that bog down investigators. The responsible approach, what I encourage, is targeted appeals. Release things that only the perpetrator or a close associate would know. Emphasize law enforcement contact points and coordinate with families before large media pushes. It's also critical to avoid sensational language that treats victims as props for entertainment.
We tried to do that in this episode, honoring the victims, recounting the facts, and acknowledging the limits of what we can say. And for listeners who want to help, if you think you remember something from 1992 that you never reported, reach out to local law enforcement or the agencies that investigated the scenes, St. Charles PD, the districts in Kansas, Indiana, and Missouri. Don't post accusations on social media. If you have a flash of memory, a name, a vehicle, a piece of clothing, or a story about someone who matched the sketches and then disappeared from a community, tell the professionals.
Yes, small, specific memories can be vital. A man who used jeweler's rouge in his garage, someone who suddenly stopped working an Interstate route in mid-1992, a neighbor who remembers the smell of polishing compound. Those are the kinds of details that might connect dots. It sounds random, but it's the detail-level stuff that cages hypotheses.
Before we wrap, I want to revisit a haunting question. The short, intense spree. All 6 confirmed murders in about 30 days. That's unusual. Marcus, what does that concentrated pattern suggest about the offender's state of mind or circumstances at the time?
A concentrated spree can mean several things. It may indicate a window of opportunity. Perhaps personal circumstances allowed or forced the offender into mobility. It could reflect escalation from compulsion. He'd been fantasizing or preparing, and then something triggered action. It also could be opportunistic travel, aligning with his usual route. The quick tempo suggests a man who, once he began, was confident and in control, and perhaps testing his method. Many serial offenders either escalate quickly or space offenses out. A short clutch of crimes like this sits somewhere in between and keeps investigators guessing.
There are also the everyday consequences on communities. In Raytown, the video store owner who found Sarah's body had to live with that discovery. In other towns, shop owners adjusted how they staffed stores, how they opened and closed. A few lives can ripple into habits and anxiety across a community for decades. It's part of why we keep telling these stories.
And because the crimes were committed in public, everyday places, bridal shops, ceramic stores, shoe outlets, they remind us that the world can feel less safe in places we expect comfort. That's why families ask the hard questions for so long. Who could do this? And could we have noticed?
We're nearly out of time, but I want to leave listeners with 2 things. First, facts. The confirmed I-70 killer victims were 6 clerks at 5 scenes between April 8th and May 7, 1992. Robin Foldauer in Indianapolis, Patricia Majors and Patricia Smith in Wichita, Michael McCone in Terre Haute, Nancy Kitzmiller in St. Charles, and Sarah Blessing in Raytown. Ballistics tied the crimes to a .22 caliber weapon using CCI copper-clad lead ammo. Traces of jeweler's rouge and consistent witness descriptions produced composite sketches and later age progressions. Second, a plea. If you remember anything, even small, seemingly insignificant details from 1992 that might relate to a man who matched those sketches, contact law enforcement. That's how cold cases warm up.
And I'll add, stay critical of speculation. This case has real people attached to it. If you have information, take it to authorities. Don't amplify unverified claims online. Real investigation requires care, corroboration, and patience.
Amen. Marcus, anything else before we close?
Just this. Cases like the I-70 killer remind us how much progress forensic science has made, and also how much we still rely on human memory and moral courage. Someone out there knows something. If you do, please speak up.
Thank you. Thank you. That's it for this episode of Still Unanswered. I'm Emily Hart with Dr. Marcus Llewellyn. Our reporting for this episode leaned on public records, news accounts, and archival information from the original investigations. Links in the episode notes if you want to read more. If you have a tip, please reach out to the police agencies that investigated these scenes. And if you're in a place where this episode brought up painful feelings, please take care of yourself. Pause, breathe, talk to someone. We'll keep following cases like this until the answers come. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Emily. Take care, everyone.
Goodbye.